All the stories that matter.
And the people behind them.
You're plugged into
Your Story on 947 Drive with
And
Tando.
she joins us live. The amazing Mandy Wiener is in the building. I mean, you're always in the building, but
I'm literally in the building every day.
every day.
Every day.
I mean, on my way to the building, I'm listening to the midday report, and you do it so beautifully because it's like bite-sized information on everything and anything. And I walk in ready for, our show. We try to touch on current affairs every now and again when we're not talking about Msizi's friends doing weird things.
Yeah, I was listening to that conversation. That's wild.
Getting up
Hey?
to silly buggers, eh?
But yeah, you do that so beautifully, and you only have 1 hour in which to do that.
Do you really listen?
Absolutely. I mean, I
thank
quote you, Mandy. There's sometimes I say I was listening to midday reports, and Mandy said
Mandy
such
Wiener
and
said
such.
it must be true.
Exactly. How do you do that in literally 1 hour, put together all that information and have it be received in a way that's not over our heads?
Well, I only have to work 1 hour a day, which is not true at all, because people always say to me, how long does it take you to prepare for your show? And I say 20 years.
Sure.
Because that's really how long it takes. It's institutional memory. It's being on the scene of stories. It's following stories for years and years and years. And at the essence of it is people just want to know what it means. And that's what I try and do, is translate it for people into like palatable,
Correct.
like understanding.
Correct.
So I take the complexities and the legalities and try and just explain it to people why they should care, why they should be invested in the news.
And it comes with experience, I think, right? And I mean, you started in university as a broadcaster, RAW back as it was called back then. I did UJFM, which was like in a corridor. And I remember people would smoke in like the studio. What did it look like in your day?
I can't remember, but I think it was pretty similar.
Yeah.
So it must have been a couple of years before you, because I was the last cohort that got their degree from RAW. So I was at RAW Radio in like 2002, 2003. I was the news editor there, and it's student radio, man.
Yeah.
It's like grungy, and it's the best. That's where you learn about how radio works.
You then move over to 702, but as a traffic reporter, and you also did sports.
Yeah, I did everything here, and I was of that age where you do whatever you can to get in the door. And I was at RAW Radio, and I overheard somebody having a conversation about the fact that 702 was hiring, so I kind of jumped on that. And my very first job was writing traffic for Harry Sideropoulos on 947.
Wow. Sure.
I used to write his traffic reports, and I would always come in the mornings to the Rude Awakening and give him his traffic report. And we joke about it now because he got my name wrong for 6 months. He used to call me by the wrong name. And then I started call screening overnights. So I would go out clubbing, and at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Where did you go clubbing? Mandy, you're in my mind, you're such a serious woman. I can't imagine you ever clubbed.
No, I did, but then I remember once having to leave the club because the Pope had died. So my friends started calling it when the Pope dies.
Yeah.
So every time I would go out and I'd be on call, and you have a couple of drinks. I've been to crime scenes and all kinds of. I've been on radio very drunk, and managed to not get fired. So
I think the secret is to stay awake through it all. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how many times I slept on the couch in the newsroom as a young reporter?
Yeah.
Because I had to either sleep it off or you worked so late. I used to work until 2, 3 in the morning putting together reports. That was what I did. And my friends used to joke when the Pope dies, I'd be called out to a shooting or a train crash. Often I'd have to leave tables, dinners and things, because I'd have to go to some kind of breaking news story.
Sure.
How then do you move from a call screener to being a news reporter at EWN?
So I did that for a long time, and then I started writing for online reports, and I was begging Katie Catapodis for a job. She was the editor at the time. Now, everybody's been through the Katie Catapodis School of Journalism, and I begged her, and eventually she agreed to send me out on a story about water cuts in Houghton. And I was like, how hard could that be? That was down the road from Madiba's house. I can do this. So I go out to Houghton, and outside one of these mansions, there was a RAV4 parked there. And I was about to ring the bell, and this car pulled up with a bunch of guys, and they jumped out, and they pointed a gun at me. And they thought the RAV4 was mine. So they said, give us your keys and all of your possessions. So I handed everything over. But I had a microphone on me because I was doing these vox pops for water cuts. So I hit record on my recorder and recorded this whole thing happening.
What?
And then the guy with the gun looked at me and he said, "Are you a reporter?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm so sorry. We're looking for somebody else." And he gave me all of my stuff back and left.
Isn't that crazy? Because that would foretell the rest of your life, what you'd actually be investigating.
Well, the next morning, I was on John Robbie's show on 702 and on the front page of the Star, and Katie gave me a job.
Wow. I mean, you quoted David O'Sullivan as saying, just keep your microphone up and your head down. And was that what it was like to be on the ground for you? I mean, Msizi speaks about how he read your book and he was scared to come to Joburg because of
the first
Killing
one
Kebble.
was, I think Killing Kebble, I read it in 2015, and I remember it was way before I moved to Joburg, and then of course Ministry of Crime came out at the same time that I'd moved to Joburg, and when I say I was terrified of ever leaving my house because you made Joburg sound like it is the most dangerous place. First, I mean, Killing Kebble was in the east.
Agents in Bedford View
in the
hated
east.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Hated me.
I'm sure.
Because I used to call Bedford View Deadford View.
Yes.
And there was so much going on at the time. But as a breaking news reporter, I spent years just chasing the news. My cortisol levels are stuffed as a result of that.
I'm sure.
Because I would always be the first person to stick my hand up and say, send me, I want to go. And I was bulletproof. It never occurred to me that something could go wrong.
I was about to say, I mean, you sat across some of the most dangerous people to come out of South Africa, your Lolly Jacksons, your Radovan Kretschers of life. Did it ever cross your mind that you were putting your life in danger?
No, it wasn't about that. So I'm very different now to what I was like then. I was young. I, thought that I was bulletproof. I thought that nothing could happen to me. I was intent on just telling the story. I wanted to be that journalist that got the scoop, and that's all that mattered to me at the time. Nothing else mattered. It was what drove me.
Yeah.
And I got to know people very well. So there were moments where I thought, whew, this is, this guy's gangster. Like, I'm very, very worried about this. But I always say I never really got a really proper death threat.
I was about to ask, were you ever threatened?
Disappointing.
When you say proper death threats, then what were the improper death threats? Or
It
the
was
light?
a phone call. Yeah. It was like death threat light.
Yeah.
So it would be a message saying, you shouldn't do this, but never a direct death threat. But I think times have really changed in South Africa. And one of the reasons that I don't actually report on organized crime to the extent that I used to, and I don't dive into it as deep as I used to, is because of that. I think that the targeted assassinations in the country at the moment are so much more serious. I think that they are ominous. I think it's a very real threat to a lot of people. We've seen auditors, lawyers, liquidators, whistleblowers being killed, and that for me is frightening.
But you almost predicted all of that. I mean, you released the whistleblowers in, when was it, 2020? And it was before what we're seeing, for example, with the Madlanga Commission. You put a voice to that before we knew we needed to put a voice to it.
And I was very passionate about that project. So I spent a lot of time with whistleblowers in South Africa, many of them state capture whistleblowers, and told their stories and gave them a platform. And I became something of an advocate for whistleblowers because people weren't talking about it enough. And I thought it was so important at the time. And in a way, it was almost a kind of premonition of what we're seeing now because of how important whistleblowers are. So a story like Babita Deokaran, for example, how crucial that is. And unfortunately in South Africa, the lived experiences of whistleblowers is that they are pushed to the fringes of society. They're treated like pariahs and pimpies. They wear the scarlet letter W. Everybody loves a whistleblower until they're in their own organization.
Are you not, I know you said you're never going to do a book like these again, but is there a part of you that's a little bit tempted with everything that's happening at Madlanga?
Sure.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I'm watching Madlanga. There are other journalists that are much better at telling that story than me right now, who are doing an incredible job. So it would be weird for me to go and to be like, hey, I'm the crime girl. I've got to do it. There's other people, people like Jeff Wicks, people like
I could see you
like
and Jeff doing it together.
No, Jeff's super capable of doing it himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't need me to do it. But I do look at that story and think, what a
delicious.
story to delicious.
There's something about, and I saw it with Lerato Höfler, who was here. Every time we'd have that breaking news, where it would happen like in the middle of our funds, where we're talking again about Msizi's phrase, it's like breaking news. Lerato is like huffing and puffing. Is there like an adrenaline to I'm not going to say horrible things happening, but being the first to put it out there.
Well, if you knew what we said in newsrooms that people didn't hear about breaking news stories, you'd be horrified. Because that's what we thrive on. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. How many people died? That's what we care about. But there is something about that breaking news buzz.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it. When you're in a newsroom and that breaking news story comes through, if I'm on air at midday on 7:02 and a breaking news story comes,
Day made.
It's
Life
day
made.
made.
Yeah.
Love it. It's rolling in front of you. And just if I'm doing a live broadcast from somewhere, election, results center, Sona, that's the kind of stuff we live for.
And we're actually going to speak about that, The Deal, which is the latest book you have out. We are in conversation with Mandy Wiener.
Come on.
Mandy, does anything, and Cece asked this question of if anything that's happening at Madlanga right now surprises you, knowing what you know from the past?
Yes and no. So the reason I say no is because this is a pattern that we've seen in South Africa repeated. And a lot of the stories that I've written books about have got this nexus of business, politics, organized crime and police. So Ministry of Crime that I wrote in 2017 as an example, or Killing Kebble that I wrote in 2011, they had very much the same model where you have, and you need these ingredients for organized crime to work, is you need a pliable and corrupt police service, particularly with high-ranking generals.
How you have the recipe, yes.
You need businessmen with a lot of disposable income. You need politicians with influence and with pull. And then you need the actual criminals, the dirty guys. And that's what forms this network. So what we're seeing is very much what we saw, for example, with Kreitzer and Joey Mabasa or other generals, whatever it may be. It's what we saw with Agliotti and Salibi. It's the same model. We're just seeing it on a larger scale. So the values are bigger. Jackie Salibi went to prison for about 120,000 rand. And you look at the Madlanga Commission now, and we're hearing
Millions.
about deals with over 300 million rand. That's the Medicare 24 tender. So for me, the one surprise has been the sheer scale, the volumes that we're talking about here, and the second thing has been the degree of threat or violence. So it was almost a code before where people weren't willing to take out witnesses in the same way.
Do you think it's because they don't fear it as much? So over the years it's gone by, it's like, oh, we can get away with this. Maybe we take a little bit more. And then that's how we get to where we are.
It's lack of accountability.
Yeah. And
that feeds into this. So in the Madlanga Commission, you're seeing General Khan being shot, or you're seeing a witness being killed, or whatever. I mean, you see Brown Mahotsi trying to himself. So I do think that it's become a much larger scale. And also, I don't trust the police as much. In the past, I would have trusted the police to protect me, and now I don't.
Yeah. Sure, which is scary to hear. I mean, in the past, you wrote Killing Kebble, sold 10,000 copies in almost 4 days, which is unheard of in South Africa. And that was your first book.
I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. And it was a very interesting time, right? So I really taught South Africans about Twitter.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. So you brought Twitter here?
No, I didn't bring Twitter.
Okay.
Here, I'm joking. But what I did do was teach people about reporting on Twitter, and that was the Kebble trial. So I remember going to two instances. The one was Lolly Jackson's murder, which was in July of 2010, and going to the scene. And I'd opened a Twitter account, but I didn't really know how to use it. And I thought, sure, I must do some breaking news tweets. So I had to send them to a friend. I had to SMS a friend, and they got into my account and posted it, and those tweets went viral. And then I remember sitting on the benches of the South Gauteng High Court in the Brett Kebble murder trial, and sitting next to a colleague, and he had posted something on Twitter, and I thought, oh, I wonder what's going to happen if I start live tweeting this trial.
Sure.
So I started live tweeting Glenn Agliotti's trial and his testimony. And it became this massive thing because there were no TVs in the courtrooms. So nobody could watch the trial. And then that blew up and everyone started following me on Twitter, and I got hundreds and thousands of followers because people wanted to know what was happening. And then Oscar Pistorius happened.
I was about to say, you did the exact same thing with the Oscar trial. The initial trial, we didn't have access, right, to the trial. It wasn't televised.
So the very first appearance, and that was the bail application, TV cameras were not allowed in. So we were sitting there live tweeting it, and globally people were following us to find out what was going on. So with that, obviously, comes huge lessons and huge pressure as well, and it's that desire to be first versus the desire to be right. And we learned that very quickly.
It was similar to, I guess it was our South African, and I mean, not downplaying the incident and what happened, but it was the O.J. Simpson trial happening in South Africa. O.J. Simpson trial obviously was televised. You then became our eyes and our ears, but not only that, I imagine there was a race to who is going to tell the story internationally first.
Yes, there very much was, and there was so much competition. You speak to any journalist about that trial, and people actually don't want to speak about it anymore. The environment was very toxic. There was a lot of competition. We had British media that came here that were willing to pay for stories. They were desperate for scoops. It put huge pressure on everyone. Everybody became just horrible, and it was a horrible environment to work in because there was so much interest. You know, we always thought that story would be when Madiba died, and we had always prepared for when Madiba passed away. As journalists, we all had this M plan in our newsrooms, and then the Oscar Pistorius trial happened, and that was massive global interest, and there was so much pressure that came with that.
And I mean, you, if I'm correct, you were pregnant at the time, and your due date was, I think, the first day of the trial?
Yes. So what happened was Barry Bateman and I got a deal to write a book. And the way it happened was between the bail application and the start of the trial was a period of about a year. And I managed to fall pregnant in that period. And I remember we had the trial date, and I was sitting in the gynae's room, and the gynae said to me, "You're due on this date." And I looked at him and I said, "Is there anything you can do about that?"
Can we change that?
So I ended up with a newborn baby, my first child, watching a live stream of the Oscar Pistorius trial. So my poor son watched weeks and weeks of the Oscar Pistorius trial.
But you then putting this book together with Barry Bateman, obviously you're a human before you're a journalist. How difficult was it for your personal opinion not to get in the way?
I think as a journalist, it's very important that you're not a stenographer. So, and that Ferial Haffajee famously said that, you're not a stenographer. So my job is not to regurgitate what other people say. And that means that I also need to interpret for people. I need to analyze things. I need to give them context. I need to explain things to people. But the question is then, do you not bring bias? This idea of a journalist being entirely objective is a myth. There's no such thing. So I try and be as balanced as possible. I'll try and present both views and say, this is what the one argument is, this is what the other argument is, and leave it to the audience or the reader. But in some instances, people want me to give an opinion. So the perfect case at the moment is Andrea Johnson, as an example, where I might have a view which is different to other people's views because I've got a personal lived experience of Andrea Johnson. But at the same time, I need to be able to watch the commission and allow my view to be changed because of what I've seen.
What do you say then when people ask you about Andrea Johnson? Do you give your honest opinion?
So I give it on air all the time. On 702, people ask me. And what I've said in the past is that I know her as a prosecutor. She was part of the team that prosecuted Jackie Saleeby. She was part of the team that prosecuted Oscar Pistorius. She's an excellent prosecutor. I've always known her to have integrity and be credible. But you can't watch the Madlanga Commission and not have serious concerns about credibility and concessions that she's made. And that for me is a real concern because it impacts on the credibility of IDAC. And we need an independent corruption-busting unit in this country. So we also need to be prepared to not have holy cows and heroes and be able to have our minds changed and provide that analysis for people.
I think you do that so beautifully, and you did it with the deal as well, where, yes, you've seen many elections over the years, you've been at Rock many a times, but with the deal, you did something different. You managed to sit with these politicians and have conversations that journalists have never had before.
And I thought it was so important to tell that story. So the deal is the backstory of the GNU negotiations. So I go into the backstory about what really happened because we don't know as reporters. We weren't allowed into the rooms where the politicians were negotiating the deal for a government of national unity. And what I wanted to do was tell that inside story. So I wanted to go into the conference rooms or the hotel basements or into the Inanda Club. I know the irony, right, of these like leftist organizations meeting in the Inanda Club to determine the future of
a
South
country
Africa.
that's suffering.
Yeah, with the highest Gini coefficient in the world. Or at the Westcliff Guest House.
Of the Enthovens.
Of 80 Enthovens, Westcliff Guest House with this vista over the parks of Joburg. So I try and take people into those rooms. And the way I did that was sitting down with politicians who were in the rooms for hours and hours and listening to them, and creating that environment for them that they felt comfortable enough to talk about it.
I was going to ask, were you then surprised at their willingness to have these conversations?
And they said stuff about each other, hey?
Really?
Yeah. So
what's the worst thing?
No, you must go read the book.
Okay.
But
I read the book, but my question, similar to Tando's, I mean, everyone has read, of course, Ministry of Crime, Killing Cable, and all the books preceding The Deal and other books. How are you still able to get those politicians or even the gangsters and mobsters? How do you get them to still agree to sit down and talk to you when they know that book is coming out?
People want to be heard.
Okay.
People want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want their version of the story to come out. And I'm willing to listen. And I get flack for that sometimes, for giving criminals a pedestal, for glorifying them. I've had a lot of that kind of criticism, that I'm glorifying criminals or that I'm giving politicians too much room to speak. I'm not a fighter on air. You know that on radio, I very rarely climb into somebody and have a go. I don't think there's any value in that. I want to listen to people, and my style is to give people enough space to
sink themselves.
Yes.
I think also something beautiful that you do, again, how I said earlier, you preempted. And did you think this was going to happen? Did you imagine a government of national unity? Because I think that's what you're constantly getting right. You're almost able to predict the future.
I never make a prediction, especially on radio. You don't look into a crystal ball and make a prediction. You find ways around that, because then people come back to you and say you got it wrong. I think that it was a scenario. I'm always reluctant to say I saw it coming. People like to claim that.
But you were right.
I don't know. I thought maybe we'd have a smaller coalition. I didn't think we'd have a government of national unity. I thought it would be a smaller coalition, which is essentially what it actually is.
Mandy, you mentioned that you'll never again write any book that has to do with the underworld or organized crime. Is it because of motherhood? Now you've got a family.
Yes.
There's repercussions now.
Yes, and I'm not as bulletproof as I was. I've got to think about other people. So a few years ago, just after I wrote Ministry of Crime in 2017 or so, my kids were small, and I thought, what am I doing? This is crazy. And I never thought I would be that person.
That you'd be scared.
Not that I was scared, just that I started to think about the implications and the repercussions, and I couldn't deal with the stress and the anxiety of it, and the worry of upsetting people. My skin got quite thin. And
I'd argue that. I don't think your skin is thin at all.
I started to really think about the implications on the people that I was writing about as well. Whereas as in the past, I maybe wouldn't have. So as you mature, you start to think about it more deeply. And think about your responsibility as a journalist. We have great power. We can influence people's lives. I can go on the radio and say some trash about you, and that can have a massive impact. I can write a story, and every time your name is Googled, that's the first thing that comes up. So I'm a lot more mindful of that. But at the same time, I do think we absolutely have a responsibility as journalists to shine a spotlight on the darkness and what is being done. And I think we have to continue to support investigative journalism. In many instances in South Africa, investigative journalism is what brings this to light. And that means we've got to buy books, we've got to fund journalism, you've got to pay for paywalls, because it's so crucial.
I think it's really what's keeping South Africa alive, investigative journalism, because people are being called out. But then you moved on to write a memoir. If I'm correct, you've written 2 memoirs, am I correct? Of
yes.
Other people.
Yes, of other people.
So Vusi Pikoli, and then there was the Robert Marawa story. What moved you into that direction, and how do you choose? How does one get Mandy Wiener to write the memoir?
I don't know. It's a combination. I can't even remember what happened with Vusi Pikoli. I convinced him. With Robert, I think he convinced me. To do the book. And I like to call it a palate cleanser. So in between doing investigative work, I quite enjoy telling people stories and sitting down with them and really getting to the heart of it and trying to relay that. And it's fascinating to really understand people. And I think it's important for people's stories to be recorded for history, for posterity. So in both those instances, I felt that they were individuals with phenomenal stories that people could really take value from.
What does that process look like? I mean, obviously, you're either speaking to criminals in the underworld or you're speaking to trailblazing South Africans. Is it the same sort of approach?
Yeah. I take exactly the same approach. For me, it's sitting down with people in person where they're comfortable and making time for it. And it's tricky for me because on radio, everything is so fast-paced. My attention span is terrible. I have full-on ADD, not being able to concentrate on things. But when I'm listening to somebody for a book, it's hours and hours. And I will say, you can ask Robert about this. I'd say, like, what color was the carpet in the room at the time? What was the weather like on that day when you got dropped off at school? What stands out for you? It's to paint that picture, to create the scene, because I'm not there. I need you to do it for me. How did it make you feel? And with these guys, you've got to push them. How did it make you feel?
I think you almost become somewhat of a therapist, right? Because you're sort of forcing people to even go into spaces maybe they had shut off, chosen to forget or not to speak about, and they passed.
And then, of course, comes the decision-making process. Do you want that published or not? Because it does become a lot like therapy.
Yeah. Are we in conversation with Mandy Wiener, and she chose today's Vava's J track. Okay, Mandy, you chose the song. We're going to let Msizi guess what the track is. Can you tell us about the song?
So this song was the first song that played when Barack Obama was elected as president in the US. I was there. It was 2007. I was in Grant Park in Chicago. It was one of the most unbelievable. As a journalist, you get a front row seat to history. And this was a front row seat to history. I was in Grant Park. Barack Obama came out. It was one of the songs that played throughout his campaign, on every campaign speech that he gave.
Can you give me a little bit more about the artist, maybe?
The artist is
one of the most influential rock artists of all time. Rose to fame in the 70s. Mandy, what else you got?
I can give you a very obvious clue. If you
okay.
want.
Give me an obvious one.
The boss.
Oh, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's Your Story with Mandy Wiener. I mean, over the years, I'm sure you've seen the most horrific things, Mandy. But you, like I said, you're a mother, you're a wife. How do you cope?
I'm a big advocate for therapy when it comes to journalism, and it's something that we've seen a real shift in newsrooms. When I was a young reporter, it wasn't something we were so willing to do. We'd rather have that bravado and tough it out. And now I think people are much more mentally aware. And I've seen terrible things. I've seen awful crime scenes. I've reported on stories involving children and just the most harrowing details. Being on scenes where children have died. And I did go for therapy. I think that's absolutely crucial to be able to do that. But I think you also learn to compartmentalize. They equate journalists with paramedics and police officers because you deal with a lot of secondary trauma as well as primary trauma. So often you're on the scene and you see something, but then you got to talk about it for the rest of the day.
Correct.
And you talk about it over, and you talk about it over.
And you don't emote.
And you don't emote. You can't emote.
And how do you, I guess, disconnect or decompress? Because I imagine the amount of information that you're constantly consuming. Even I sometimes am fatigued. I can't imagine how fatigued you are from just information overload. What do you do to disconnect? And do you ever do that at all?
Absolutely, you have to. You have to disconnect. When I was a reporter, I used to watch a lot of the Kardashians.
Okay.
Because I used to find it was the one thing that could make me completely
Mind-numbing.
disconnect. It was mind-numbing. Or cooking shows because it was nebulous. I watch a lot of sport.
Okay.
I watch a huge amount of sport, and I read a lot because that also switches your brain onto a different channel. But I think it's really important that you have real people in your life and you don't talk about this all the time. My worst thing, and people know this, is going for dinner and then people ask you,
Oh, what do you think?
what do you think? But, oh my God,
It's
I really don't want to talk about it.
It's like asking a comedian to tell a joke at dinner.
Yeah.
I've seen it firsthand. I'll bump into Mandy and I'll want to chat about whatever I read in the deal.
Yeah.
And she has no interest. She's just like,
Leave me alone.
I'm trying to drink my coffee. Can you just leave me alone? I can't still be talking about this.
And I'm quite boundaried about it.
Yeah.
I'll say to people, I do not want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you'd rather watch Tottenham Hotspur lose.
Oh, you've got good intel, hey?
Let's go back in time, 2002. Today's Vava's J track, as selected by our Yourstory guest, incredible Mandy Wiener, released in the year 2002. It's the year in which Finance Minister Trevor Manuel delivered the national budget speech. Also in that year, Johannesburg was preparing for the upcoming World Summit on Sustainable Development. That was a big deal. Remember that?
It is, and sustainable development goals are still a massive deal in the world.
Do you remember where you were during that period?
In 2002, it was my first year of varsity.
Oh, hectic.
Yeah.
Okay, so becoming the Mandy Wiener that we know today. I think you're also a big advocate on active citizenship. And I thought I can't let you go without speaking about that, especially because we're about to go to the polls.
We're about to go to the polls. I'm very passionate about this. I love to speak about what I call the hope dealers. And in fact, the last couple of weeks, I've been spending time with people who I call the hope dealers, who are people who are changing the narrative in the city of Joburg. So there's so much negativity bias in the news. We've spoken a lot about how it's overwhelming and negative. And I think as journalists, you've got a responsibility to balance that. I believe in light and shade. And that's why I try and tell the stories of the hope dealers, the patriots, the people who are changing the narrative. And I think it's so important that people are active citizens, that they get involved. You cannot leave it to government alone. You've got to roll up your sleeves. So that means you've got to get involved with elections. You get out there and vote. Be part of your local neighborhood communities. Do you know what your police station commander's name is? Do you go to ward meetings? Is there an NGO that you can give a debit order to or offer your services? There's so much that you can do in South Africa to play a role in changing the narrative.
And you've played a very big role in documenting South African history. And I think in an ever-changing and ever-moving news cycle, what you've managed to do so well is pause time, because we focus on a thing and then we move on to the next. And you say, hold on, but have we investigated this properly? Have we looked at that properly? And I think South Africa is what it is because of journalists like yourself. Thank you, Mandy, for lending your heart and your mind and your passion to South Africa. We'll forever celebrate you and you'll forever be famous. Ladies and gentlemen, Mandy Wiener.
Thank you.
It's all the stories that matter.
And the people behind them.
From the big moments
To the day-to-day grind.
we're delving deep into your story.
Story.
On 947 Drive
With Tando.